Hey, welcome in. This is a video series I'm doing honestly just because I need to create more stuff. What is this series? It is honestly just an excuse for me to come up with goofy headcanons of me in different worlds of media I love. If you have any questions, comments, or complaints, you can put them in the comments and I'll eventually get around to them if they're in good faith. 2014's The Maze Runner is a movie based off the book by the same name by James Dashner. It's a charming and surprisingly heavy post-apocalyptic horror sci-fi action teen drama in which a bunch of kids find out they are unfortunately the key to everything. I'll be honest, I just watched these movies for the first time last night and I had a blast. The cast was engaging even though there was some strange acting here and there, and I found it to be shot beautifully. There was some very cool VFX shots. I found the creature design to be cool, and the plot and premise is also pretty gripping. It's pretty interesting. Quick sidebar, by the way. I am tired of people scolding the most minor acting mistakes as if they completely ruined the film. Do not get me wrong. There is bad acting, and bad acting can ruin a movie. And so can bad writing and bad cinematography. But I think it's the amount of it and the type of it that ruins it. So, like, Gal Gadot's performance as Wonder Woman, one of the most widely bemoaned poor acting that we've seen in a long time. I feel like it is so glaringly obvious and bad because of the fact that she's playing this character that is supposed to be larger than life. It is supposed to be, a comic book superhero, flawless, like godlike character, right? And so having somebody in that role playing very weird and very flat and very awkward makes that character awkward, which like takes you out of the movie, In this movie, I think my biggest struggle was Teresa, who kept like accent switching. She would be speaking with an American accent and all of a sudden be British and then back to American. I think on the other side of that, some bad acting in this movie that I found improved the movie was Chuck. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it was bad acting. I think it was just flat. I feel like he really just spoke his lines, but I feel like it really lent itself to his character. A kid who doesn't know who he is, where he is, or what he is, essentially. He's just lost everything, and he's just kind of a shell now. And so I feel like the flatness really lent itself to Chuck's character well, and I'm going to be honest, Chuck is a real one for sure. Now, before we get into how I would survive that Maze Runner, I highly recommend going and watching the movies and reading the books. They're essentially like very different stories in a like book to movie adaptation kind of way. And I'm only going to be covering the movies in this video, but if you guys want me to do a spinoff on the books, let me know. All right, now, how would I survive the Maze Runner? I wouldn't.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass.
I work a sedentary day job, and I can't run more than 30 minutes without feeling like my lungs are going to burst. However, to continue this thought experiment in a fun way, we will assume I am in Stop Throwing Snowballs. Can you res me at the statue? For the love of God, please put Bing Bong down. Physical condition. So with that being said, here are the rules of this video, so that we know what we can and cannot do going into it. 1. The way the memory wipe seems to work is it doesn't seem to affect knowledge on basics of survival, topics of muscle memory, critical thinking, and there seems to be some traces of how to use like basic tools and build structures. So I am likely not going to remember my 2 days in Boy Scouts as a kid, or my incessant surface level research on different mechanical structures or how to thrive in survival situations or whatever the fuck I've been Googling this week. By the way, if you're curious, I'm not going to go super deeply into it, but apparently it's 384 grams or like 0.85 pounds, and their brains are about 1/3 the size of human brains, at least for chimpanzees, so do with that what you fucking will, I guess. Rule 2, plot armor. This is a hard decision, but I think I get some bare bones plot armor. I want it to be, I get enough to where I could survive a little bit, but if it's like impossible, it's impossible. But I also am not just, main character going to survive everything. I want it to be a little bit of a challenge with some wiggle room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get 2 uses of plot armor. So what this does is if we find ourselves in a situation where I don't think I'm going to survive and I can't think of a contrived way of getting out that's, still doable, then we have to use one of our plot armor points. So say a griever attacks me in the maze when I'm alone. I think there is a way I could get through it. I could hide under something, or, there is a possibility. Maybe unlikely, but I don't think it's full on plot armor necessary. If I get attacked by 2 or more, I have to use plot armor to survive. If grievers are attacking me and I'm in a group, I think we got enough bodies to throw out the solution that we should be fine. Anytime we come up to something that I feel is reliant on plot armor, we'll cover it. Number 3, I only get to access what people in world get access to. No, I'll just bring a gun or XYZ with me, or I'm just gonna build a rocket launcher, or that's not how this works, and I think that's just in bad faith. So, waking up in a metal cage that is climbing towards the ceiling, the protagonist that we will be swapping places with, Thomas, finds himself disoriented, confused, and throwing up. In the movie, it takes about 50 seconds from when Thomas wakes up to when he reaches the glade. I definitely think that the first 30 seconds are going to be spent gasping for breath from waking up from the drug I was knocked out with.
Oh no!
Gaining control of my body and just beginning to look around. Okay, so I am finding myself waking up in a small box. I am in pain, I am groggy, and I am confused. I don't know who I am, where I am, what is going on. I think looking around the box, the first things I'm going to notice is the barrels marked WCKD, some assorted crates and boxes, and one of the crates is making a awful, weird growling noise. I think at this point I'm definitely going to start panicking. Between the claustrophobia and something definitely just being wrong with how I'm waking up, I definitely think I'm going to be going into a panic. Thomas in the movie goes to investigate the crate that is making the weird growling noise. Fuck that. You have to be fucked if you think I'm going to wake up after being drugged in a small cage and hear a growling noise and go, that's the first thing I should look at. I am going to the other side of the cage and I am going to, I don't know, probably start crying. Jesus fucking Christ. This is awful. Now, the most pressing thing that I'm going to begin to realize is that I am rocketing upwards at quite a troublesome pace. And looking up, there seems to be a roof with flashing lights above me. I have a maximum of 10 to 15 seconds before I crash into the roof, judging by how quick it is closing in. I feel like a lot of people here would say, oh, I'll look around and take stock of what I have, blah, 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 blah. No, the fuck you would not. I'm sorry, but unless you are specifically trained with how to deal with the life-threatening high-risk scenarios, I find it hard to believe anyone would get past fuck. There's a barrel, and I'm in a cage, and there's a weird growling creature, and I don't know, splat. There is not much you're going to be doing in that 10 to 15 seconds. And if you think you could do better, then try this. Don't look away from your screen, and set a timer for 10 seconds. Is it set? Good. Now press start. Boom. Someone just broke into your room. They're coming at you. They're larger than you. They have a weapon. They're stronger than you. What are you going to grab? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Who are they? 3, 2, 1. They're on you. I feel like a lot of people are going to end up actually coming up with a plan at the 5 to 3 second mark. You get 5 to 3 seconds left of that to actually react and take, defensive position. Some people maybe they'll have 7 seconds left. But either way, 10 seconds is really not a lot of time to react. It's a really well-studied phenomena that people underestimate danger and overestimate how well they would react in dangerous situations. A large part of this is due to normalcy and optimism biases. Now, before we talk about these, understand this. I'm not a psychologist. I am just some person doing surface level research on this to talk about things I find interesting. If you want to learn about this topic, I have all of my sources in the comments. You can read the research papers I read from. I really, really highly recommend it. And also do this for other YouTubers you watch. If they talk about something you find interesting, go research it. You never know if they barely read it and presented it wrong. You never know if, they are, giving you information, but there's actually a lot more to be learned. It's always good to go do your own research, and I highly recommend it. Now, normalcy bias is described by the Decision Lab as tendency to underestimate the possibility of disaster and believe that life will continue as normal, even in the face of significant threat or crises. What this means is that when we think about facing or are even actually facing a life-threatening scenario, we tend to overestimate our abilities and underestimate the danger we are facing. A lot of what I understand from the research that I read is this applies more towards like a car crash. You get in a car crash, you think, oh, my life is going to continue as normal after this, and you don't think about like the risks of a broken leg. You don't think about the risks of crawling out of the car onto the glass. You don't think about any of that because you're more just like thinking that everything will be okay, everything will work out. One theory by Yamori Kei from the Japanese Journal of Experimental Psychology suggests that this effect is less strong when in immediate danger, but gets stronger after each dangerous event due to the misunderstanding of how dangerous it was or how you survived it. Optimism bias falls into line with this, as it is described as a tendency to overestimate our likelihood of experiencing positive events.
Let's go gambling!
And underestimate our likelihood of experiencing negative events.
Aw, dang it.
So in this, we find the issue of assuming we will be better or have better luck or better outcomes than we realistically would. So this also plays a huge role in, like, you have the car crash, right? And not only do you think your life is going to be normal afterwards, but you think that everything is going to work out okay. You think that the cops and ambulances and EMS are going to get there on time. You think that there is, if there's a gas leak, you think it's not going to catch fire, or you think there's not going to be a gas leak, or you think that you're overly optimistic that the bad things that could happen will not happen. The research I read mainly more so covered this in less serious life events. People tend to be overly optimistic over like how much traffic they'll get into, or like the fact they'll get divorced, but there has been some research into it being just a very common thing that humans do, and I would honestly recommend reading The Optimism Bias by Tali Sharot. It is in Current Biology under Volume 21, Issue 23. It's a super interesting read and covers how it shows up in people with and without depression, and how like people with depression actually have a leaning towards pessimism than optimism. So now that we have made our way back from that minor surface level understanding psychology detour, what am I doing in this situation? You can bet your sweet bippy I am laying my ass down in fetal position on the floor and screaming. I mean, this steel death trap has to be hurtling like 20 miles per hour towards the ceiling. If I was on my absolute A game, I think the most realistic thing I may try is stacking this barrel on top of that one and laying down in fetal near the base of them. The reason I would lay down in the fetal position is to protect my vital organs, which is a fact that once learned, I think we can all argue is a survival's basics and something that we would remember despite the amnesia. I think also what leans some credence towards this being something you would remember is it's also instinctual. When you get scared, when something happens and it startles you, you tend to cover your stomach and your chest. Upon reaching the top, the cage suddenly stops and the doors open to the brightness of sunlight. Soon though, the sunlight is blotted out by what appears to be 10 to 15 boys peering down at me. I think Thomas played it way more cool than I would have. To have 10 people staring down at you in a pit while you are trying to recover from whatever the fuck has to be a very unnerving experience. I would definitely get my hands on anything I could as a weapon. In this shot here, we can see that there are these mason glass jars in this box here. I think I would likely grab one of these, break it against the metal, and use it as a stabby stabber of some sorts. Going into this, one of the biggest things to understand is that you are almost always going to lose a fight with 10 to 1 odds. You know, I'm not saying like almost always as in 1 in 10 chance or 1 in 100 chance. Like 1 in 1,000 times you're taking on 10 people and winning. And I think getting a weapon drastically increases that. But still, 1 guy with a weapon versus 10 without is a tall ask. Having a weapon, what that does for us is we now have a threat. We can threaten to slice somebody up. We can threaten to hurt somebody. And so that gives me the confidence to demand answers. And I also think it would give the boys enough hesitation to stay back and answer until we can get on common ground and understand what's going on. So what we're going to do to avoid going into complete headcanon where I go, so I grab the mason jar, I break it, the kids react like this, I react like this, they react like this, I react like this. I think that we need to stop that there, because if we don't, I think that this essentially is just going to be a video of me making a like video essay Wattpad story. And as fun as I think that would be, it would make for a boring video. And moreover, I don't think it would ever get finished, because I would still be on, you know, page 400 of the script where I'm covering my pet mini griever, Timothy Homunculus III, fighting cranks to save me from certain doom. So how we would go about it is I'm going to cover any time where a major choice I would make would take place. Outside of that, we'll just continue to cover the movie, and we'll just assume I would make the same choices that Thomas made, or close enough to where it wouldn't have any significant changes in the outcome. Does that sound good to you guys? I'm sorry, I don't know why I asked that. I'm not going to know till after I post it, so I guess I'll wait and see. In the movie, after Thomas gets out of the box, with a bit of running and some time in the pit, he is given the rundown on the basics of what is going on. A new amnesiac boy shows up with supplies once a month in the box, with some being there for up to 3 years. The box always shows up weekly outside of that to bring basic supplies. We are in a place called the Glade, and it is surrounded on all 4 sides by a massive maze. And the rules of the Glades are, do your part, never hurt another Glader, and only runners can go beyond the walls. A runner is a person whose job is to essentially map the entire maze and find a way out. And they're somebody who must be chosen. You can't just choose to become a runner, you have to be chosen to become a runner. The walls close, and the sounds of the maze shifting and changing can be heard, while accompanied by the sounds of screams of creatures called grievers. After finding all of this out, and some side eyes and a bit of aggression from Gally, Thomas is put into what is essentially a hazing initiation ritual in which Gally and him wrestle in a circle. Upon a swift kick to the legs and a sharp meeting of head and earth, Thomas remembers his name.
I started recording this part of the video immediately after waking up at 4 in the morning, so ignore my voice.
This gives us a ton of information to work off of. Though we were told that no one has seen a griever and lived to tell the tale, we do know that they are active at night, there is more than one of them, and they sound to be rather large. I feel we could also reason that they likely aren't relying on the boys from the Glade as a food source. Why is that? Thanks for asking. So, if you're sending people into the maze daily, but we only get 1 new person a month, and not every new person is cut out to be a runner, then we are left to infer that, though dangerous, the maze is not lethal enough to warrant a complete halting of exploration to preserve working bodies for the Glade, which I would personally take to mean that people are not dying at a daily, weekly, or even monthly rate. And if that's the case, either these grievers can go up to months without eating, or they are living off something else in the maze. The maze itself, combined with the box and arrival of a new member every month, gives us some other clues. Who or whatever WCKD happens to be is providing us with bodies and supplies to take care of them. This would immediately make me steer away from thinking of this as some sort of death trap, as they could simply just not give us food and make us eat each other or whatever. They are sending in younger boys, with most seeming to be around early teens and mid-teens, and maybe even up to 20 for someone like Albie. The maze is something that isn't just naturally occurring, so we know it was built, and we know the maze shuts itself at night and opens itself in the morning. All of this together points to a pretty easy to deduce conclusion. Instead of spelling it out though, let's take the logical steps together. Once a week, supplies are sent up with the letters WCKD on them. I'm just going to start saying Wicked. I'm not going to say WCKD every time. Once a month, another boy is sent up with these supplies. The supplies labeled Wicked are what we need to survive. The place the supplies and the boys are sent to is a safe part in the structure, a place meant for people to survive. The maze opens every day and closes every night. There are creatures that either can't starve or feed on something else in the maze that are active at night and are dangerous. From all of this information, the logical conclusion to draw is who or whatever a Wicked is wants us to survive and explore the maze in the daytime. So either Wicked built this maze and wants us to do something or find something in particular, or someone or something else built the maze, and this Wicked is tasking us with exploring it. No one has made contact with anyone outside the maze in the past 3 years. This means either way, we are being watched or tracked in some way. Taking all of this information and reasoning in, I think my first course of action would honestly be to talk to the runners that night. Ask them if there are any other animals or creatures in the maze, ask them if there's edible food in the maze, ask even about the layout. My personality at the core is very curious and inquisitive. Though I ask a lot of dumb questions and may struggle with understanding things at times, I always feel driven to at least try to understand them. I would try to press for any information I could get on what they know, what they've tried, and what patterns and breaks from said patterns they have observed. I don't think I'll be quite as eager as Thomas to try to become a runner until I had a decent idea of what I was going up against. Another aspect I'd immediately get to work on is a bit overlooked but very important: introductions and greetings. Trying to get to know a little bit about everybody and trying my best to be approachable while finding my place in the community. I would try to see who seems most aligned with my goals and wanting to leave, and who's most aligned with wanting to just hide out here and wait the days out. I would want to know what jobs there are so I can find a way to offer any skills I may have that I can reasonably remember. All of the socializing would be around trying my best to meld into the group, especially with having someone like Gally, who seems to be a leader, being so hostile towards me since the beginning. Even though no one is to hurt another glader, being ostracized like that one coworker who you tolerate would still be a very unfortunate thing. Throughout the night, Thomas has dreams of fragmented memories, with the key features of a woman saying Wicked is good, and what appears to be Doctor standing over him. This would honestly just build upon my already mounting distrust of Wicked, and I would likely mention this to someone. Likely Albie, since he seems to be the de facto leader of the Glade. Speak of the devil, and he shall wake you up and show you the wall where all the boys carve their names while he tells you about the dark times, by the way. Albie explains that before there were any rules, there was chaos and many boys died to fear, and he goes on to explain and emphasize the need for trust amongst everyone. As the day passes, Thomas spends it working and talking to Newt. Oh, we haven't introduced Newt yet? Shit. Super flashy and fast character introduction sequence, go.
Fletcher McGee, Rainchild, Zeke Jr.
I get it!
Anyways, he spends his time talking to Newt, trying to figure out info on what they've all tried, and Newt continues to shut everything down, saying they've tried it all before. One of the bigger talking points is how the vines don't go all the way up, so they cannot climb out. But even if they could, where would they go from there?
Are you fucking dumb?
This is something I would jump on immediately, because there are so many things wrong with Newt's answer to this. Where would you go from there? My man, you can see so much more information on where you are. Not only that, but even if the maze shifts, there will be dead ends, and where there are dead ends, there are places you could walk further and further out. Sure, maybe you get to the edge of the maze and there's a 300-foot drop, but bucko, we got trees, leaves, and automobiles. Okay, maybe not the last one, but we can still build a way down. Also, to the two people in the comments, please stop typing about how shit and heavy a 300-foot ladder is going to be, by the way. I think a 300-foot ladder would be an awful solution. You know what wouldn't be, though? 2 or 3 40 to 50-foot ladders. You would have to honestly be a bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs if you think we're going to try and climb 300 feet directly up. Thomas's actor is 5'10", and if you look at this image, you can judge that the distance from the ground to the bottom of this interlocking piece is roughly 20 to 25 feet up. This is followed by an indent that, judging by the shape of this here, has a flat part going in. Looking at the buildings in the glade, we have bamboo to build with, which is surprisingly light and sturdy. If we are being as harsh as we can, we will say that we are working with the heaviest bamboo weight I can find online, which is listed at 6 inches wide and weighing 30 pounds per 10-foot pole. If we are going with the tallest 50-foot ladder and assuming a standard rung at every 14-inch interval, and we do a bit of a narrower ladder with it being 12-inch wide rungs, we will come out to a weight of about 450 pounds. But I think, assuming that we are somewhat intelligent, we could cut the rung size in half, both making it more stable for standing and grabbing onto. Instead of like the round bamboo 6-inch chute, we have 3 inches wide and it's flat and easier to grab onto and step onto. That takes the weight down by about 75 pounds. So we have a 375 pound ladder. Now, this may be heavy, but these pegs stick out about 2 to 3 feet and are wide enough to get 2 people onto. I confidently think that 4 of the larger boys can move 375 pounds 10 times to get to the top. 2 boys at the bottom of one ladder and 2 on top of the peg. The 2 at the bottom start passing up this ladder. The 2 at the top start leaning it over to the next peg, and then they climb across and repeat this cycle. Once they get to the top, they can pull up one of the ladders and tie the entire rope to it and use it to pull up other people one by one, starting with the lightest person first. I think to make this even easier, they'd have people climb up the vines and drop the rope down to there, but have some extra rope that goes all the way to the bottom too. The reason you would want to tie it to the ladder is it gives you a way to tie it off and sit back and take a break and relax while the person on the rope can hang. And that's because no single person is going to outweigh even one of the ladders. So you can take it, wrap it around somebody, wrap it around the ladder, start pulling them up, and between 4 guys, I think pulling somebody up 300 feet is probably going to take, probably 20 to 30 minutes, maybe an hour with breaks. But then you have 5 people up there, so it's going to take a little bit less time for the next person, and a little less time for the next person. I think realistically this is going to be a multi-day process, and in the end it would still face some issues with food and water supply chains. But outside of that, I think this is a very doable thing. I think the hardest part is going to be the initial 4 getting up within the morning of the maze opening to the night when it closes. Do I think I would have the foresight to come up with this in the world? Maybe. I think given time, it would be a logical idea to try and climb from peg to peg, and the rope system would come out in the wash naturally. Do I think I could convince the others to try this, though? Hell no. Just because it's feasible doesn't mean I'm going to be able to convince the boys. Saying that we should tear apart our guard tower in City Hall to build ladders for a hope of getting out in a frankly dangerous and labor-intensive way is a hell of a hard sell. All of that is also countered by something mentioned in the books. I know I said I was only covering the movies, but if we're going to be truly particular here, in the books it states that spikes would come out of the walls if the boys tried to climb them. As he heads back and complains about the situation, he soon finds a graveyard of animal and human bones, where the boys who have died and seemingly the corpses of the animals that have been sent up are laid to rest. Before he has time to think about it, he is attacked by Benjamin, who seems to be breaking. Ben rants with a demented, fervored, almost animalistic look in his eyes about how it's Thomas's fault and that he saw him before pouncing on Thomas and strangling him. Thomas manages to get out with a solid blow to the dome with bars, before getting up and running back to the glade and screaming for help. When they hear this, they come to his aid, restraining Ben and tossing him into the pit before eventually banishing him into the maze that night. Thomas gets a rundown on how Ben got stung by a griever, which is unusual with it being broad daylight and is now experiencing the changing. Which I have to honestly admit sounds goofy as all get out. It sounds like Ben is experiencing what it must feel like to be a baby getting changed on a baby changing station at a dirty truck stop.
Baby changing station, baby hanging station.
Ugh, I shudder just even thinking about it. Poopy diapers, flickering stall lights, and the smell of cigarettes aside, though, Thomas goes on to tell Albie about what Ben had said, but says he has no idea what it means. I honestly don't have too much to add here other than when getting attacked, it really felt like Thomas only used his upper body, where I would have been flailing my hips, legs, and bodacious ass to try and get out from under Ben. Some more dreams of Wicked is Good come to pass, this time more prominently featuring some girl that Thomas can't remember. In the morning, we have a bit more of the manual labor bonding time with our good old friend Newt before a storm front moves in and forces us to take shelter. One thing of note happens in the morning before the storm, and that is that Albie went into the maze with the runners, which he usually does not do. As night draws nearer, there's no sign of the runners or Albie, and everyone huddles around the door worried. Just when hope seems lost, they see Mino dragging an injured Albie. Everyone cheers Mino on and encourages him to drop Albie, but Mino can't, and it looks like he won't make it. Within the last few seconds before the doors seal, Thomas books it through and goes into the maze with Mino and Albie. I would have done the same, because Albie's the person who has been in the Glade longest and the person who we've talked the most about the other things we've seen and heard going on. I think he's the most likely to have some idea of what is happening in the Glade and in the maze. But I would have first done it when I seen injured Albie being dragged by Mino, not when it is so close to close that me running through the door feels like I'm one of those spelunkers trying to re-experience birth, but from stone. Before time slows down in the scene, there's roughly 40 seconds before Thomas takes off. Seeing as he has 0.fuck that seconds to make it through when he does, let's shave 15 seconds off this time, as they wouldn't be able to get through the door even in single file. This gives us a working time of 25 seconds. The average person who is untrained can run a 40-yard dash or 120 feet in roughly 6 to 10 seconds. Now looking here, I would guess that this is definitely within that 40-yard dash range. Thomas isn't trained, but he's very fit and can run pretty damn fast. So let's put him at 120 feet in 6 seconds. That is honestly more than enough time to get to Mino, pick up Albie's legs, and run out. We'll be fair and say it takes 3 times longer to run out than it did to run in. 6 seconds in, 18 seconds out, and we'll say it takes 1 or 2 seconds to just grab somebody's legs, turn around, and start running. That gives us 25 or 26 seconds, which still puts us at the beginning of Go-Gurt or Red Yogurt time. This isn't what happens, though. Thomas gets himself trapped in the maze with Mino, and now it's nighttime. You know what that means. Griever time! The boys wander the maze for a bit before they start hearing the sounds of the grievers. They decide it's best to hang up Albie in the ivy so they can move freely, but as they are doing so, a griever begins making its way towards them. Mino pulls an Iron Maiden and runs for the hills, while Thomas hides underneath the ivy trying to hold Albie's body up. Once the monster of muscle and machine makes its way by, he climbs out and ties off the rope, hoisting Albie's body up just in time to hide around the corner from the griever coming back for one last peek. I can't even begin to comprehend why Thomas does this, but instead of going back to hiding once the coast is clear, he just begins looking around and awkwardly stumbling about. This is another safe Bippy moment, where you know you are going to find me taking a nap under that ivy till daybreak. Instead, he meanders his way underneath a griever before having to do his best Puffalope impression and sprint burst his ass out of there. They go on what appears to be a 2 or 3 gen chase before Thomas bumps into Mino and they decide to try and shake the creature feature by heading down a closing alleyway. This, folks, is where I think my first plot armor for the movie gets used up. I honestly don't think I'd have the spatial and bodily awareness to properly time getting through the closing walls fast enough to not find out what a PBJ feels like, but just slow enough to get Griever Graves over here squished up, which we need to move the plot forward. Once Thomas and Mino return to Glade in the morning, a city hall meeting is called to discuss the killing of the Griever and Thomas breaking the rules. Mino gives his accolades, Gally's a whiny crustacean as per usual, and Chuck gives us a little Thomas, Thomas that no one responds to, which I both genuinely laughed at and found endearing when I saw his defeated look. This hullabaloo is interrupted when the sound of the box coming up is heard. Everyone freaks out and goes to see what is going on since it isn't due back yet, and when they get to it, they discover there is a girl in it. It is actually, and you're not gonna frickin' believe this, the girl from Thomas's dreams. She has a note saying that she's the last one ever, and everyone kind of assumes she is dead because she isn't breathing. But then she gasps awake, says Thomas's name, and passes back out again. There's some bickering over what the note means, and Gally accuses Thomas for everything. Thomas then decides he wants to go dissect the Griever to try and learn more, and manages to convince Mino and some others to come along with him. When they find it, they see a glowing red light that once pulled out shows to be some strange object with the number 7 on it. Mino seems to take some particular interest in it, and they decide to keep it. The only thing I'm doing differently here is I am taking as much of this thing back with me as we can. Metal is a huge resource to just leave behind, and anything we can learn about this helps us better be equipped in the future for encounters with them. The group makes their way back to the glade where a few of the older boys, including Newt, Mino, Gally, Frypan, and Thomas, discuss what to do with this newfound doohickey. Gally points out that everything started going wrong once Thomas showed up and that he should be punished for breaking the rules. Newt agrees and punishes Thomas with a night in the pit, with no food, and by making him officially a runner. This sets Gally off, but it has been settled. Now that Thomas is a full-fledged runner, Mino shows him the map of the maze. He goes on to explain that he's mapped every variation and every wall over the 3 years, and there is no exit. One odd thing he found, though, is there are 8 sectors, numbered 1 through 8, and a different one opens each night. They hypothesize that the 7th sector is where the Griever paste back in the maze came from, and it may be their way out, so they'll go check it out tomorrow. Jeff and Clint barge in to tell them that the girl has awoken. Thomas makes his way out and introduces himself to the girl, and she introduces herself as Teresa. They go on to flap some lip about her remembering Wicked is good and how he sees her in his dreams. Teresa also goes on to reveal that she has 2 syringes marked Wicked, filled with what looks like blue banana bug juice. Thomas ponders over the whole Wicked is good thing and decides it must be a cure for Albie. I think this is a bit of a jump, but whatever. I still think since we have 2 and Albie is dying already, there is minimal harm in trying it. They head over to the shack and chat with Boy Salamander about Albie's condition, and they agree to shoot him up with the Chug Jug and monitor him. Unfortunately, our time in Bamboo Jail with no snacks has come. Gally leads Thomas to timeout, and on their night stroll, Thomas asks Gally why he has so much beef with him. Gally responds that essentially it boils down to everything went wrong when you showed up, and I don't want change, before putting Thomas into the pit. Not too long after, the sweetest boy Chuck comes along bringing some food to make sure Thomas is ready for the run in the morning. They have a heart-to-heart about how Chuck thinks his parents miss him, but he can't miss them because he doesn't remember them. All of this stirred on from a carving he made that he wants Thomas to give them when he gets out of the maze. Thomas hits Chuck with that 1-2 do-it-yourself buckaroo because we're all getting out of here speech, and they say goodnight. Mino and Thomas take off into the maze the next morning, and Mino is surprised to find that Sector 7 is open, even though it is not due to be open for another week. They wander deeper into the maze and through an area Mino says is called the Blades. I just want to stop and say that the way their voices reverb out the walls feels unrealistic, but also kind of perfect. It feels like dissociation, and I feel like it captures a lot of the feeling of being on the outer edges of the maze. I'm no astutician, so I can't say for sure, but the reverb does feel a bit excessive. Anyways, their thingamabob starts beeping and booping and all that, and it leads them to an area Mino has never seen before. At first, they find themselves at a dead end, but upon closer inspection, by which I quite literally mean getting closer, the dead end begins to rise up out of the way, revealing a chamber. This is another situation where I really dislike a very simple choice made. Both boys walk into this chamber together, almost hand in hand. I would for sure tell the other to stay back so that if it begins closing for any reason, we can at least ensure someone can take the Griever piece, which is going to be referred to as the key now, by the way, out. My point comes to be a bit more poignant as they both get scanned before an alarm starts blaring. The whole maze begins to quake like my lower abdomen after Taco Bell, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, look at this shit. You really think I'm not using plot armor number 2 here? The sheer chance of not getting beamed by a piece of concrete shrapnel alone is just oofta, my guy. We got 200-foot tilted towers, but they are dropping on us instead. After a harrowing run back to the glade, Thomas gets his ass absolutely chewed by Gally the goddamn goober. Before Thomas can fully finish trying to serve it back to Gally, Teresa lets them know that Albion is now online.
Albion Online is a sandbox MMORPG in which...
I think here I'm actually moving with Thomas's steps, but a bit more than he did. I'm making it very loudly known that we have found a way out, and making it a point to almost point out how it seems Gally just wants us to continue living in the glade and to never experience freedom. I can tell we are reaching a boiling point, and I would want to know my allies before things go south. They make their way to Albie, who is being cryptic and sad, saying he remembers, that he won't let us leave, that Thomas was their favorite, and asking why Thomas came here. Before they can get any more answers, the noise of the gladers beginning to panic settles into the air. They rush outside to find that the doors are not closing and nighttime is upon them. Needless to say, The grievers lay waste to the glade. This guy, he's dead. Another dead one.
He's dead, dead, another dead one, deady, deadified, 2 more dead, dead from the neck up, dead from the neck down. But
That's Maze Runner, though. In the altercation, we almost lose our dear friend Chuck, but Albie saves him by chopping off the Griever's stinger, only to be yanked out of City Hall 2 seconds later with the final words of "Get them out." I say surviving this isn't plot armor. We have a large group working together, and I think every choice that kept them alive is a choice any reasonable and rational person would make in that scenario. No big plans, just some good old ape together strong and get to the shelter. Gally confronts Thomas once it's all over with a lovely punch and some harsh words. Thomas deduces that poison plus cure gave Albie his memories back, so he uses a stinger on himself, and Teresa treats him. I personally would have asked Teresa to be the one to get stung. I would explain to her that she's the one who is the most different from us, with her being a girl, her immediately remembering her name, and her being the one sent up with the syringes. And so we may have the most to learn from her memories. But if she wasn't okay with it or she didn't agree with it, I would go the way of Thomas and do it to myself. Thomas wakes up the next day in the pit with Teresa, finding out from Newt and Mino that Gally has decided Thomas and any supporters of him will be banished soon. Together they all make a plan to finally get out once and for all. Thomas fakes being unconscious as he is dragged to the entrance, where Gally reveals his plan on sacrificing them instead of turning them into the maze. The group has a mini coup, and they convince a decent swath of the remaining Gladers to accompany them to try and finally make it out, simply saying they'd rather die trying than die in the glade. A group of 13 by my count take off into the maze and make their way to the blades, with some spears and knives. I am definitely making sure that before we go in against any grievers, we're coming up with a very basic plan of staying tight-knit and trying to keep all of our spears spread evenly. Now that I have my memories back due to Desert Rose plus Friday I'm in Love, I think I'm going to be able to call some very basic spear formations that could be taught in 3 to 5 minutes. Essentially, I would say that we need to keep our points high, some low, and widen out a little so that anywhere a griever tries to get close, it's going to get ouchie mode. The group ends up having to fight off from what I count to be 5 grievers as they try to get the key to unlock the door. We almost lose our dear old friend Chucky Finster to the 50-50 of griever or gravity, but we manage to make it out. There's a stressful moment where the door asks for a code, and we have to figure out that the code is the pattern in which the 8 sections of the maze open up each night. They ask Mino for this, and after somebody sacrificing themselves to help stop Mino getting attacked, they're able to get it and get through the door. As they make their way through the corridor, they find a room that was from one of Thomas's dreams. Upon entering, they find it strewn with dead bodies and blood. Thomas finds a blinking red button that once clicked shows the playback of a woman named Dr. Ava Page, who tells him that they have survived what is called the Maze Trials, which is crazy because I didn't see a single ear of it, but whatever. Anyways, the kids are immune to a virus called the Flare, which turns people into mindless rage zombies, and it has no cure. The virus came about after the sun went silly mode and scorched the entire planet. They were being experimented on to see what makes them different, and as she expositions all over the place, you can see armed people coming in and shooting people, before she eventually brains herself. After her body hits the floor, a large set of sealed doors open with the hiss of promised escaped. But of course, right at the finish line, something has to go wrong, and here comes Goofy Gally with a pistol and a fresh new griever sting to boot. He starts talking about some nonsense about we can't leave, and we belong to the maze, and yada yada yada. There is not a damn thing I can do here. Kid is at least 30 feet away with a piece and is off his gourd on the sun juice. The best thing you can do against an armed person is give them what they want, and this guy wants me pushing daisies. Unfortunately, I am out of plot armor. Gally raises his arm and, taking a spear to the chest from Mino, pulls the trigger. Even though I don't have plot armor though, I survive this. In a horrific turn of events, as Gally raised to shoot, Chuck used himself as a human shield and took a bullet for his friend like a real one. As Gally shot, Mino tried to take him down and honestly landed a nasty chest skewer, but it wasn't fast enough. Chuck falls to the ground, and in a devastating scene, gives the idol he made back to Thomas and dies in his arms. A bunch of masked men come in and drag the kids out while Thomas pleads for them not to leave Chuck there. They are taken to a helicopter where they are flown away and over the hell that was home for 3 years for some of them. Pensive, pissed, and probably exhausted, our ragtag team flies off to a new fate under the promise things will be better. This is when the audience sees that Ava's suicide was an act and the kids are about to be subjected to even more torture. Alrighty, The Maze Runner. I think it fits firmly in like my top 30 movies. Interesting plot and some good questions and answers. I don't think it is by far the best movie ever made, but it's for sure worth a watch and maybe even a rewatch or two. I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it, and also go read the book, you lazy bones. Most people aren't reading enough anymore. If you do though, awesome. You get a gold star for today. I'll be honest, on a scale of being able to change the outcome of media with my own choices, the Amnesia makes this one a bit lower. However, when getting into the Scorch Trials and the Death Key, or just other media in general, I think a lot of the things I know, think I know, and pretend to know will come into play with the choices I can make a lot more. If you guys have anything you want to see me try to survive, let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. You're all superstars, and I hope you have a great day.